According to bombshell new reporting from the conservative Wall Street Journal, two of Donald Trump's cabinet secretaries, his top advisors, rushed into the Oval Office to stop Trump from escalating a tariff disaster, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we're definitely going to take a look at the full Wall Street Journal article, but Mediaite is reporting on this specific detail from the Wall Street Journal's report. Trump cabinet officials rushed to Oval Office to convince Trump to scale back tariffs while trade advisor was away. Two of Donald Trump's cabinet officials conspired to confront him on scaling back tariffs while trade advisor Peter Navaro was away from the Oval Office, according to the Wall Street Journal. The paper reported Friday that on the morning of April 9th, amid market turmoil, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick saw a small window to convince Trump to scale back his tariff plan and took it. I want to stop right there. Okay, Scott Bessent, that makes sense because of the three people involved in this, Peter Navaro, Howard Lutnick, and Scott Bessent, who is terrible, is by far the best of them. But it says something that even Howard Lutnick, that's the bald, crazy guy who's going around saying, "Oh, tariffs are great. They're actually a tax cut, not a tax increase." Even he is like, "Man, this tariff shit's getting way out of control." That is such a tacit confession about how disastrous the Trump policy is. Stunning stuff. But we'll continue. The two reportedly acted quickly while Navaro, one of Donald Trump's most vocal advocates for tariffs, was occupied in a separate meeting with economic advisor Kevin Hassett. Writing for the Journal, Josh Dawsey and Alexander Seedy wrote, "Navaro isn't one to back down during policy debates and had stridently urged Trump to keep tariffs in place, even as corporate chieftains and other advisors urged him to relent. And Navaro had been regularly around the Oval Office since Trump's Liberation Day event. So that morning, when Navaro was scheduled to meet with economic advisor Kevin Hassett in a different part of the White House, Bessent and Lutnick made their move, according to multiple people familiar with the intervention. They rushed to the Oval Office to see Trump and propose a pause on some of the tariffs, without Navaro there to argue or push back. They knew they had a tight window. The meeting with Bessent and Lutnick wasn't on Trump's schedule. Trump agreed with Bessent and Lutnick and later announced a partial rollback on social media, which was said to have caught Navaro off guard. Via text message, Navaro denied the report. He told the paper its report was, quote, more mischief from anonymous sources seeking to divide and conquer the trade team. The White House did not deny the report via a statement from spokesman Kush Desai. Trump has assembled an all-star trade and economic team to implement his America First agenda and finally address our country's national emergency of persistent trade deficits. Every member of the Trump administration is playing from one playbook, Trump's playbook, to level the playing field for our workers and industries and restore American greatness." So again, we're going to take a look at the full report, but again, stunning. That the Trump administration and the Trump White House is such a discordant, chaotic clown show that these two cabinet secretaries felt the need to basically wait until the Iago whispering or the worm tongue, depending on what literary reference you want, Lord of the Rings or Othello, whispering in Trump's ear, like tariff, global trade war, it's a really good idea. That they felt the need to rush into the Oval Office and try to get him to relent, and Trump did, with Navaro not in the room, and that's what was responsible for some of the tariff rollback, some of the inconsistency there. It's just a stunning admission, number one, of how easily manipulated Donald Trump is, and number two, how chaotic the White House is, where they can't go into the same room and advocate publicly, full-throatedly, for their policies no matter who is around. Stunning. So let's look at the full report, again, from the conservative Wall Street Journal. Trump advisors take advantage of Navaro's absence to push for tariff pause. Navaro, an advisor to Trump in favor of wide-ranging tariffs, had been a fixture on the president's side since Liberation Day. They needed to get the president alone. On April 9th, financial markets were going haywire. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick wanted Trump to put a pause on his aggressive global tariff plan. But there was one big obstacle: Peter Navaro, Trump's tariff-loving trade advisor, who was constantly hovering around the Oval Office. Navaro isn't one to back down during policy debates and had stridently urged Trump to keep tariffs in place, even as corporate chieftains and others had urged him to relent. And Navaro had been regularly around the Oval Office since Trump's Liberation Day event. That's the excerpt that we read. The two men convinced Trump of the strategy to pause some of the tariffs and to announce it immediately to calm the markets. They stayed until Trump tapped out on Truth Social, which surprised Navaro, according to the people familiar with the episode. Bessent and Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt almost immediately went to the cameras outside the White House to make a public announcement. But we needed everyone singing from the same song sheet, a person familiar with the matter said. The stock market had cratered after some of Trump's tariffs had started to go into effect on April 2nd. The next week, an even more troubling sign had emerged. a sell-off in Treasury bonds, normally a safe haven when markets are turbulent. The Truth Social post sent the stock market soaring and helped stabilize the Treasury market. Later that day, Trump said he made the decision because financial markets were getting yippy and because he was keyed into warning signs from the bond markets. Just hours earlier, he had told people in a separate Truth Social post to stay cool, suggesting that he might stay the course. A spokesperson for Bessent said that, quote, Trump's team is working hard to implement the American First agenda for the American people. Those who aim to divide the president's team on trade seek to undermine our administration's goal of uplifting hardworking Americans. A spokesperson for Lutnick said Trump's team was working together. Quote, the notion that we're playing Gossip Girl games is simply false. We're fully focused on implementing Trump's vision, a spokesperson said. White House spokesperson, and we read that statement in the Mediaite article. So let's get to this. The alliance between Bessent and Lutnick illustrates how fast things can change inside Trump's White House. Bessent and Lutnick were locked in a messy public battle during the presidential transition when they were both vying for the Treasury Secretary job. Bessent ended up winning out over the objections of Elon Musk, but Lutnick was given the hefty trade portfolio as part of his consolation prize running the Commerce Department. On trade, however, there are numerous White House officials who have opinions and strategies, including Navaro, who learned much about White House maneuvering during his time in Trump's first term. Navaro has proven a singular force in Trump's orbit, a longtime advisor who's channeled Trump's pro-tariff instincts and often annoyed his colleagues. He served a prison sentence last year, but returned as trade advisor when Trump won, and Trump has told others that Navaro went to prison for him, the Wall Street Journal has reported. Navaro was a polarizing figure inside Trump's White House during his first term, often clashing with National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. At one point, Mnuchin and Navaro went together on a trip to Beijing to discuss trade with Chinese officials, and tension between the two men became so heated that they engaged in a heated back and forth outside the talks. Trump has been long fond of Navaro, though, and they share a maximalist view on trade policy that calls for more dramatic changes. Navaro co-wrote a book, quote, Death by China, which shares many of Trump's views on Beijing. Navaro's hardline views on China have helped him win the support of large parts of Trump's base, many of whom are anti-Wall Street, but has made him a pariah with many financial executives and business leaders. Folks, again, this is just stunning, okay? So once you think about all the turmoil going around Trump's tariff war, his global tariff war, starting with the Liberation Day tariffs, the back and forth, the inconsistency, the market turbulence, the ups, the downs, mostly the downs. We saw what happened with the bond markets as well. And then Trump walked back some of these tariffs, imposed a 10% global tariff, said that would remain, increased the tariffs on China. So it's effectively, comes out in the wash. What he has in effect as we speak is nearly as economically damaging as what he originally proposed under those global tariffs. And the entire inconsistency came from this internal dispute between, three key White House officials, but basically two camps. You have Peter Navaro on the maximalist trade tariff side of the ledger, and you have Bessent and even Howard Lutnick. Again, that's the one that kind of perplexes me the most, because Bessent, I understand, and so many of these people have to undermine their credibility, sacrifice their credibility to be a Trump stooge. But Lutnick has been out really full-throatedly endorsing the tariff. So to know that behind the scenes he was working with Bessent to sideline Navaro and get Trump to walk these back, that's stunning. That's stunning. And this report will no doubt freak out markets even more, because it indicates that Trump's tariff policy is dependent entirely on who happens to be near him at the right or wrong moment. Once again, demonstrating that Donald Trump has neither the savvy nor the experience nor the spine to be an effective leader. It's not just the tariff policy, but it's the inconsistency associated with it. What happens, we have this 90-day pause. What happens when, it expires? What happens if Peter Navaro happens to be the last person in the room? There's no telling. And that's going to freak out investors in the markets even more. It's going to vaporize 401ks. It's going to vaporize college funds. And Democrats need to be on this relentlessly. But stunning stuff to see this sort of West Wing style, House of Cards style drama unfold. And it's sad that the Trump administration's top advisors, again, don't have an atmosphere of, candor and full expression where they can express dissenting views to better advise the president of the United States. That's where we are, and we're now 3 months in. Scary stuff. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.